I think to answer that question, we have to look back a little bit. You know, when I look at the beginning of my sales career, sales training was all about personal relationship skills, right? Go into the customer's office, usually look on his walls and compliment his family and notice that he was into golf and talk about golf. And then I remember sitting in my first selling as a business process class, this notion that selling follows repeatable patterns and you can have this process for uncovering customer needs and applying your value. And I think that switch from personal relationship to business process has lasted some 20 years. And it has been in place, and as we talked about earlier, though, the market has shifted around that, and that is still in place. Now, recently, within the last couple of years, the notion of insight selling emerged. You know, bringing insight to your customers, and that was I think a good shift from the legacy sales approach of process training. And what we're looking at now is something we refer to as precision guided selling, which is really providing sort of a conduit from leaders down to salespeople, such that leaders can connect their strategy to the tactics of salespeople at every stage of the sales process and provide the salespeople with the data and the insight to make better decisions on behalf of their company. The other side of precision guided selling is providing the salespeople with actionable insight, again, at every stage of the sales cycle from qualification to close, so that they can lead customers to make better decisions. So we really believe going forward, decision making better decisions on behalf of your company, leading your customers to make higher value decisions, that's really the future of selling. And where you do that is with data, or what you often like to call actionable insight, which is even a much more ground level way of saying I need something I can write data, right time, right format. So that's kind of what we see going forward.
Well, we're seeing the same thing, Brian, is people talk about, you know, why should I change how we sell? Well, because your buyer changed.
Yeah.
You know, a decade ago, a buyer would have to call you, have to talk to your salespeople because they need to get information about your product. And today, that's ubiquitous. It's out there on your website, your competitor's website, industry blogs. I can join groups within LinkedIn. I can find out a ton of stuff about products without ever talking to a rep. So when I do talk to a rep, what's the value add they bring to the table? And, you know, I still see a lot of companies when I talk about, well, we're training our people to go out and be customer-centric. And I say, well, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're dealing with the what of selling. So what I want you to do is call I. What I want you to do is differentiate. What I want you to do is create a sense of urgency. What I want you to do is sell value so we can avoid discounting. And the sales reps have been through that training so many times in their career, if they're professionals today, that what they're doing is they're going in and saying, stop. Look, I already know what to do. You need to help me with how. You know, how do I go have that discussion with an oil and gas executive versus, say, manufacturing executive versus financial services? And how do I do that against competitor A versus B versus C?
Yeah.
And how do I do that when a company wants to justify the product versus, you know, total cost of ownership versus impact on margins?
Yeah.
So it's just totally different. And you've got to go back through it and give them the how of selling. And until you do that, you're really not going to be going out. You can say you're customer-centric and you can say you're going to be challenging with your customer, but unless you give them the information to actually go out and execute, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. When I think back to my early days of sales training, I was told sell high. And the way you get to decision makers is decision makers are paid to see the future. So I was taught, again, yeah, that's what you need to do. But what I really needed at the time was, all right, what is the data? What is the insight that I can bring to that decision maker that will get me access to help them see the future? And I think even more importantly, and this is where I think some of the mistakes are happening with that sort of big surge to insight, is that insight's got to be at the right level. First of all, it's got to be at the right level of buyer you're talking to. It's got to be at the right level for the seller. That it's not this idea of bringing insights to your customers, not one size fits all. It's got to be, again, right day, right time, right format. And then, but you look even further. I like what you said about the how, because we're also taught in selling, and legacy selling teaches you to understand the customer's buying process. What we actually need to be doing today is leading the customer's buying process. We need to be able to say to the customer, look, the world has shifted. When you look at sourcing my sort of solution, here are the stakeholders in your organization who should be involved. Here are the sort of criteria you should be using when you're putting us side by side with someone else. And so that gets back to the how. Again, it's not just enough anymore to understand buying process, but be able to lead it. We recently took a look at 55 companies, and we were looking at their ability as organizations to create and capture value. And what we know from our win-loss review practice, 12 years, $20 billion of studying key wins and losses, that winners win when they meet customers' needs at higher confidence and lower risk than some alternative. So we went into 55 companies and we studied frontline sales and cross-functional leaders and said, can you do that? How effectively can you map out how you meet customers' needs? Again, in this very fluid, changing environment, how well can you map out at this moment in time how you meet a customer's needs better than an alternative? Higher confidence, lower risk. Results were dismal. It was absolutely dismal. And this is, as best we can tell, looking at $20 billion of key won and lost deals. This is the data salespeople need. This is the what, as you say. This is the data that they really need, the insight they be able to need to map those things out as the market is shifting.
I think, Brian, too, you bring up something really interesting because you've talked a lot about the fact that things keep changing.
Yeah.
And so it's not just getting to the point where today I can do all those things with a customer. Is how do I do that 3 months from now?
Yeah.
3 weeks from now, three days from now. We live in such a frail ecosystem today that things are constantly changing. And the changes in the economy, changes in the business environment, changes in regulatory environments, the political landscape, competitive landscape. If I'm able to adapt to all these things very, very quickly, I can maximize new opportunities that show up, and I can minimize the threats of new things that are coming in and affecting my business. And so what are we doing to not only put that process in place, but constantly monitor it so that we can go in and fine-tune it very, very quickly and make those proactive changes versus waiting until, hey, next year in that sales meeting, we ought to cover this topic. That's way too long from now.
Well, and it goes back to that sales transformation question. So what we're talking about, there's a skills aspect, right? Mm-hmm. Salespeople need the actionable insight at every phase of the cycle to be able to make better decisions, to lead customers to making better decisions. Then there's the organizational competency piece, which I just heard you talking about, which is the organization needs to be able to, one of our consultants calls it real-time marketing. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to real-time market, understand customer needs shift, competitor shift, and our value prop shifts, and get it such so that if we've got 4,000 salespeople around the globe, we can have words coming out of their mouths tomorrow that are reflective of what's happening today. Mm-hmm. And that really is, again, back to how quickly everything's shifting. The organization needs to be able to be adaptable and build an ecosystem for collecting that information, turning it into something that's actionable, and getting it in the hands of salespeople.